And we are live, and I've lost my notes. There it is. Okay, so let's dive in, unless you have any questions first. Okay. From nanometer processes to networking protocols to Raspberry Pis, there is a ton of geekery in this field that I just don't have the brain for. Fortunately, there are people like my guest out there who are ready, willing, and able to help me understand complex topics or even just the nitty-gritty stuff that I can't wrap my brain around. And my guest is one of the best at that. And I could tell you how he breaks it all down, but I think it's best that we please let Gary explain. Gary Sims, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Adam. Very great to be here. Thank you.
It's fun to be here. And, I wanted to start things off. The reason we started chit-chatting back and forth was because you and I both did a review, a review of sorts, of the Jackery
1000
big butt battery is what we're going. Yeah, the Jackery 1000, and I did just a straight up review for it in Digital Trends, and you had a more interesting take on it. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how you took the Jackery and gave it a Gary Sims twist.
Well, I mean, I was imagining that lots of people had reviewed this or were reviewing it. So I thought that if I just kind of do a standard review, that's kind of just repeating everybody else. So I thought to myself, well, solar power, what's that interesting? I thought, oh, cryptocurrency, I know. Why don't we see whether we can do some cryptocurrency mining on solar power? So I set it all up and charged it all up and then set up a little rig and made absolutely no cryptocurrency money whatsoever.
But you did make an interesting video out of it. So.
I hope so. Yeah.
It was a fun twist. And I mean, so the next question I need to ask you before I forget is, how's your inbox been since then of other people with battery generators trying to get you to do stuff on their stuff?
Well, in this particular case, nothing, actually. I haven't had any other emails.
Okay.
I seem to get a lot of requests to do portable HDMI monitors. That seems to be the thing at the moment. I get about a request once a week for those. Yeah.
No kidding. Can you mine cryptocurrency on HDMI?
No, you can't. Okay, no. I'm working on it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't know about like my inbox, like LinkedIn, DMs on Twitter, emails. I've gotten probably since I did that review 2-3 weeks ago, I've gotten pitched on 6 different portable batteries or generators. Wow. So to the point where I messaged my editor at Digital Trends saying, "Help! I'm drowning in review requests because I mean, what I'm imagining is that like maybe not a lot of people do reviews on this stuff because I haven't done any independent research on this. I haven't, gone out to see, but it seems like I've done reviews of products and had other people contact me then about competing products. That's nothing new. Like I'll do a review on, I'll do a roundup on, mini projectors for LifeWire. And like all of a sudden I get an email from somebody saying, "Hey, we've got a mini projector. Would you like to take a look at it?" And that's not unusual. But I mean, like literally 5 or 6 or 7, I made a tag for it in Gmail because I've gotten so many requests for reviewing these portable batteries / mini generators. So I'm just wondering if there's like not a lot of traction out there for stuff like this, even though they are immensely useful.
I suppose it's two things from you getting a request. Of course, one thing is that the crossover between camping and smartphones is a kind of a very thin.
Oh yeah.
Thin thing. So the fact that someone in a tech site or with a tech background is reviewing something that would really be for the outdoor hunter, camper, RV people makes it a new segment for them. I think that's part of it because they don't get much review. I'm sure if you were looking up Angling Daily or something or Campers Weekly, then maybe they've got reviews of all this stuff. So that's the and why you're getting them and I'm not is because I live in Europe, and even when I told Jackery I live in Europe, they went, "Oh, you live in Europe, do you? Oh, oh, that's a bit tricky. What are we going to do about?" And so it took a while even to get the thing here because you know, it's not small, as you said, and it doesn't kind of fit in the postman's pocket as he's delivering my electricity bill. So
right.
yeah, so I think you've got an advantage over me there.
I need to ask a question though. I mean, and I mean this with all the respect in the world, but they didn't know you were from Europe.
No, exactly. Funny enough, I just did a video, and someone like 2-3 days ago, and someone wrote me a message on Twitter. We talked about the video a bit, and at the very end they said, "Okay, thanks very much. Happy 4th of July." And I said, dude, the British don't celebrate 4th of July. We were the losers, you know.
Right.
We didn't win, you know. So we don't have a 4th of July day. Loser day, you know.
That's awesome.
Like, did you not? And he went, "Oh yeah, I forgot about the accent." I was like, yeah.
Have you watched any of my videos? I mean, seriously, this is not hard. It reminds me. Actually, I just remembered this particular scene from a movie, Keeping the Faith. Good movie with Ben Stiller and Edward Norton and Jenna Elfman. That's it. Anyway, so there, Ben Stiller is describing a date of his that he went on, and he said, and when we got dessert, I ordered a pecan pie, and she said, "Oh, that's great. Can I have a bite of that?" And I said, "Sure." So she took a bite, and instantly her face swelled up like a balloon, and she said, "Oh my God, are there nuts in this?"
Exactly.
Oh, but yeah. So happy 4th of July, by the way.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, we hold it dear to our hearts, you know.
Yeah. So well, and it also reminds me of, I was watching an interview with oh God, the Hamilton guy. I'm totally blanking on his name. Lin-Manuel Miranda. Jeez, it's early. I'm sorry. But,
yeah, that's
anyway.
Europe and US time zones here. It's the evening for me now. Yeah.
But anyway, so I was watching an interview with Lin-Manuel Miranda about watching Hamilton in England. Like, he was watching. He went to a staging of Hamilton, like with the Prince and Princess or something like that, and it's like, we're doing a play about his great grandpa. and he obviously, the play does not give a good reflection on the British royalty. So he's like, how's this going to go over? So anyway, so we could talk about that all day. But one thing that I learned from and I want to touch on our CES trip at some point. But one thing that I learned from our CES trip is that you don't even live in England.
No, I don't know.
Because I think we were trying to arrange something for like the Android Authority podcast, and I'm like, so you're like 5 hours ahead of me, right? And you're like, no, you're like 7. I'm like, no, England is 5 hours. And you're like, I don't live in England. So where do you live? I thought that was interesting. That was fun. Fun fact about Gary.
Well, actually, I live in Romania.
Okay.
Because my family, my wife and so on are Romanian, so I live here.
That's fun. That is very fun. And it's funny when you were doing that Jackery review, and you're videoing around your backyard. I'm like, that looks like any suburb anywhere. Like,
yes,
yeah. You had the lawn and the 6-foot fence and the keeping the neighbors out. It was I'm just like, that could honestly be next door to my house, and I would not be able to tell the difference.
No, exactly. I mean, it's Romania, although it has a very checkered history. Today, it's a modern European country, and as you saw from the videos, it's very beautiful and really nice.
Yeah, awesome. Do you get back to England every now and then, or?
Well, normally we would try to go, at least once or twice a year. But with the pandemic, I haven't been back to England now for, what is it, year and a half, 2 years it's getting on to now, isn't it?
Did Brexit complicate anything with going home to visit, or?
Not for visiting, but I mean, again, the same thing. If you say to somebody, I'm in mainland Europe, and they say, good, we'll send you something from Amazon.co.uk, and I say, no, you won't, because
that's not going to work.
It's not going to work, and they're like, what do you mean it's not going to work? It's like, come on, wake up,
You mean we can't just send it across state lines like we can here? Oh man!
Ta-da! Exactly.
That's it's fun, like and that's why I want to go ahead and just harken back to our CES trip. So you and I met in person. It was CES 2019, was it? I
Sounds
think.
about right. Yeah, sounds about
yeah.
right. Yeah.
So, and one of the things that I remember most about the trip is our morning trip out to Hoover Dam, which was an amazing time. And pro tip, and I think I've said this on the podcast before, but pro tip: if anybody's in Vegas and they want to go visit the Hoover Dam, go at sunrise, because as it turns out, Gary had never been. You'd never been like in any desert, right?
No, that's right. Yeah.
They're not very common in Romania or in England. And so Gary said he wanted to see. It was a sunrise over the desert, right? That was basically your goal for while you were there. And I wanted to go see Hoover Dam because I had never been. And so Johnny Feist, bless his soul, combined both tasks and said, well, let's go watch sunrise over Hoover Dam. And man, just some of the scenic shots that we got. Like I usually pause in my Google Photos feed whenever I get to that particular stretch, because it's just like, oh, that's so great. And I'm sure you got some really amazing shots yourself while you were there.
Yeah, it was a good set of photos. And I always like showing people the one of the state lines where it's, because there's also a time zone shift. So you look at the one tower, it's got the clock on it, and then you look at the other tower, it's got the hour different and things like that. So only in America can that kind of thing happen.
Right. That was actually a fun fact, and I didn't even realize that when we went to Hoover Dam was that it was in fact straddling a time zone. So yeah, on one side, I think by the time we got there, it was like 6:30, but it was 7:30 on the other side of the dam. So that was pretty cool. And then I very much appreciated you and Johnny putting up with my crap and wanting to drive like 3 more miles into Arizona to go get a geocache while we were there, just so I could get that state off my map. So I appreciate you guys dealing with that. That was fun. So have you been to any trade shows since CES? Not a lot has happened since then.
No, that's right. Yeah, it's been kind of, everything's been shut down. So looking forward to when it's going to start up again. Don't know when that's going to be. I've gave up making predictions outside of tech. I don't make predictions inside of medicine. That's not my that's not my field. But I mean, it'd be nice if 2022 things start up again. That would be really nice. But we'll have to wait and see. Yeah, absolutely.
So you weren't one of the 16 people that was at MWC this year?
No. I thought about it for about half a nanosecond and then decided not to go.
And I think that's pretty much what Google and Samsung and everybody else did too.
That was a very brave thing for them to try to put it on, but I mean,
it's
not going to work. Not going to work. No.
Yeah. All right. So, one of your most recent videos, and this is actually kind of a hot topic these days, is Windows 11, and you had some interesting experiences trying to get Windows 11 going on one of your computers. So I was wondering, not one of your computers, seven of them? Seven different computers. Tell us a little bit about that, because that was a fun story that I was checking out.
Okay, so when Microsoft announced Windows 11, they also did a few things. They released the minimum system requirements, so you know how much memory you need, how much storage you need, and so on. They also started shipping out the insider previews, which you can sign up to Microsoft and get the very, very latest ones. And they also published a checker tool, which you can run on your machine, and it says, oh, you don't have enough memory, or you don't have enough disk space. Now, the problem is that Microsoft included 3 very tricky minimum requirements. One is you have to have TPM, which is the Trusted Platform module. The other is you have to be able to have secure boot. So a lot of machines from a few years ago either don't come with a TPM module, or just it was too before it was there, and neither do they have secure boot. And if they do have them, they're not turned on. So, for example, literally before I came on this podcast, I got an email from someone offering for me to review something, and my first question was, does it support TPM and secure boot? And they said yes, but they're both off by default. So a lot of people have these things in their machines, in their PCs, but when the checker tool runs, it says no, you don't have TPM, you don't have secure boot, you can't run Windows 11. So a lot of people are falling over that hurdle. But what I did was I said, okay, I'm Gary Explained. I'll go into the computer and I'll see, right, my one actually supports TPM, good, enable, yes, okay. Right, secure boot, okay, enabled, yes. Oh dear, my machine can't boot. Why is that? Because I'm using the wrong type of partition table. So I've got to convert the hard disk to a partition table that's supported by secure boot. I did all that. So I thought, right, I've got everything I need. I then ran the checker tool and it said, no, your processor is too old, your CPU. He told me I have a Ryzen 5 1600. So I don't consider that particularly old. Okay, it's not the latest thing, but it's not particularly old.
Right.
And what Microsoft have said is that if you have anything that is pre-Zen 2, so that would be the 1600, the Ryzen 5 1600, anything in the 1000 series, and some of the processors in the 2000 series will not run Windows 11. And then if you've got an Intel processor, if it's an i5, let's say 7700K or whatever those are, that won't run it either. It has to be an 8th generation or newer. So if that's the case, then there's literally a lot of people that don't have a Zen 2 or and then I look at the other machines I had here, the other 7. I've got an AMD A series, A6 series. I've got what else have I got? I've got some Atoms and some Celerons and some other things, and none of them will work. Not one of them will upgrade to Windows 11. So I felt that Microsoft were being a bit mean to me, really.
Yeah, seriously. So, all right. So I'm running an MSI laptop here. Let's walk through this. I'm curious now. So I've got my MS Info 32 up. So, what's the first thing that I should look for in here?
The first thing, well, TPM is one to look for. Yeah, if you actually start the security processor app, if you're running Windows, go down, press the little start button, and just type security space processor. That will run an app for you.
Processor, because we're talking about Gary. Processor. All right. Okay. So I got security processor details. Information about the trusted platform module TPM. I've got a TPM specification specification version 2.0.
Great, you're set. That's good. Yep.
Banging. All right. So cool.
And that also means that Windows recognizes it because it means it was enabled inside your BIOS. So that
not off by default. Good. Always a good sign.
Exactly. Now the real question is, what processor do you have? That is the real question.
I know this. Where is that? System summary is Core i7 10750. So that's 10th generation.
Yeah, you're sorted then. Yeah.
I mean, I just bought this laptop like about 6-8 months ago. So it was. Yeah. How much memory do I need?
Oh, the memory and the disk space is not a problem. 4 gigs and 64 gigs of storage. So those really aren't the issue nowadays. They used to be the issue.
I got that. Okay.
4 gigs of memory. Who needs 4 gigs of memory? Yeah.
All right. And then what was the other thing you were saying?
There's a secure boot.
Secure boot. Where would I look for that?
I don't know. I can't remember now. You've put me on the spot. I can't remember where you look for to whether that's enabled or not.
Okay.
I think you have to go into computer management and into the disk manager and then see whether I don't know.
Okay. Well, that's okay. I mean, we went over secure boot is on, preventing malicious software from downloading when your device starts up.
There you go.
I got a Windows 11, baby.
Yay!
Yeah.
Well done for you. Yeah.
And then actually, for any listeners who might be listening, I just went to the search and I typed in secure boot. It's in device security, which is, let me see if I can oh wait, no, I can't walk that back. So it's in settings and it's under, okay. So it's in device security. If you go there, I guess it's on, just settings and then device security and bickety bam. So, and I did the same thing for the TPM. I can't even remember this stuff. So I got Windows 11. That's awesome.
Well done.
Yeah. So, all right.
You see, the problem is some people who may have bought a very expensive laptop, let's say 3 years ago, and they really kind of like, I'm going to buy a laptop that's going to last me a long time, and they spent $4,000 or $5,000 on it, and now they find out they can't run Windows 11. They're kind of like, hello.
That's not cool. And it's like, what would you? I mean, like, Yeah, because 8th generation, we're on 11th generation now, so that's only 3 years ago. So that's 2018, and that's assuming when you bought the laptop in 2018,
it was the latest and greatest.
It had the latest and greatest, which is not always the case, obviously.
Definitely not.
So,
and you see, because of the pandemic, you know, people haven't necessarily gone out and bought a new laptop. Or if they have bought laptops because they're doing online stuff like we're doing now, homeschooling, maybe they've bought cheaper ones because they want it for someone to do, you know, schoolwork or something. They haven't spent $4,000. They've spent, you know, $599, and now they find out that that one can't run Windows 11 either. So, you know, combining the pandemic and the chip shortage, and now Microsoft saying these things is kind of a nice combination. And I think kind of Microsoft need to, you know, kind of wake up and realize what's going on here.
Right, and yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, on the one hand, whatever line, as you described it, a line in the sand, whatever line in the there's my backup. Whatever line in the sand Microsoft wants to draw, I guess it's their operating system and they want to make sure it runs great. But you actually interspersed clips inside there saying like, why is Microsoft drawing this line in the sand? And it's like you see Satya Nadella being like, Windows should adapt to you, not the other way around. So it's wonderful. It was a beautifully done video, and but I'm happy that you walked me through it, and now I know I can have Windows 11. But can you run Windows 11 on a Raspberry Pi? One of our viewers is asking.
Yes, you can. Yes. So just like you could run Windows 10 on a Raspberry Pi, someone has taken the preview build that's available at the moment and they've stuck it on a Raspberry Pi. Of course, completely unsupported, of course. I mean, that's the standard
Well, right.
thing.
Like, how would you even begin to do that?
Well, it's two things. First of all, that the current builds don't require any of these things that Microsoft's saying. So you can actually install it on a machine that doesn't have TPM because they haven't switched it all on yet. They've said, this is what we're going to do. And we've got between now and October, and we're going to be releasing these builds with more and more things. Like when Google released new versions of Android, in the developer previews, there's lots of stuff that changes between the first 4, 5, 6 releases that they make until you get to the final beta. I mean, it's a lot of changes, and it will be the same with Microsoft. So there's no TPM module, no secure boot in a Raspberry Pi, so that's fine. And the other thing is Raspberry Pi, they've done a lot of work, some really good guys on the internet done a lot of work to make sure that there is the UEFI but firmware available for the Raspberry Pi, so you can boot up any standard image now. It doesn't have to be a Raspberry Pi image, as long as it's ARM, and that's how they got it. That's how they got it running. So yeah, kudos to the hackers on the internet. They can do almost anything. You give people enough time, and they'll do anything. So there you go.
Oh yeah, and I saw it was somebody was running Windows 11 on a Lumia Nokia, 950, something like that. It was and honestly, that's why I really appreciate people like you, Gary, because like that's the kind of nerdy stuff. Like, so I'm nerdy. I'll admit I've got I know I like to play with phones and dig into phones, and I never use the same phone for more than 2 weeks and yada yada. I love that stuff, but like people like you and like the people that are installing Windows 11 on Raspberry Pis are just so much like beyond where I could where I can wrap my mind around, and that's fine because like there's different levels of geekery out there, and I appreciate the fact that you take your level of geekery and my level of geekery and kind of bridge the gap by like explaining how how to check to see if your Windows can run what was it? I don't even know what I was going to switch it around. Yeah. If your computer can run one, can your Windows run computer? I don't know, but yeah. And so like there must have been a time, because I know you were doing Gary Explains videos for Android Authority, but there must have been some kind of like moment when you realized like maybe Gary Explains is a thing. Like maybe this is something that we can do separately, because you spun off your own YouTube channel off of the Android Authority YouTube channel. So like what was that catalytic moment when you realized, oh, this is a thing. Let's do this.
Well, what happened was, I can't remember the exact video, but I was doing a video and it wasn't a phone review. It wasn't a look at the an app or something like that. It was an explainer, and I thought, what happens if I just put Gary Explains in the title, which is what I did, and I made this video. It was Android related, something to do with Linux kernel or memory usage or something. I can't remember exactly now. And it was okay. It got received and it got a lot of views and it was great. And then I did a couple more, but then I got to a point where I thought, hold on, if I want to talk about something that's not quite Android, now if I want to do something about Windows or Mac or Linux or a Raspberry Pi, that doesn't quite fit into the Android Authority, theme, because it's
the brand,
Android brand and smartphones and all that kind of stuff. So we had a chat and we said, well, why don't we try a separate channel, which is an explainer channel, which I can cover everything. So here we are covering Windows 11, which isn't something you could have done. I could have done over on the Android Authority channel, because people would say, I thought I was watching Android Authority, not Windows Central, or something like that. So,
people are very pigeonholed on YouTube, I've noticed. But
so that's what happened. Yeah. So that was 2 years ago now, I think.
Wow. Has it been that long? So where are you at these days in terms of like metrics? What are 222,000 subscribers?
Yeah.
So you're like almost a quarter of a way to a million.
Yeah,
That's
nice.
Nice.
I was just thinking that $250,000 is a nice number, isn't it? Yeah.
It is very nice. It is a very nice number. And you know what? I know I'm subscribed, but benefit of the doubt is not subscribed. But look, we just subscribed. So now you have 222,001
one subscribed. Thank you very
right.
much. Thank you.
That's
It
right.
happened here live, everybody. You saw it happen.
You saw it. So and it's great because the intersection between you said Windows 11 isn't necessarily good for like an Android Authority channel, but Windows 11 is going to run Android apps. So I mean there is, and it's kind of weird. Not weird per se. Like I guess anybody paying attention could have seen this coming, but like there's such an intersection in between like Windows and Android and even Mac OS to an extent. But it seems like just to get a little critical of Apple here, it seems like while different devices are trying to come closer together, Windows running Android apps and yet it seems like Apple's kind of going the other direction and like really trying to like circle its wagons and like keep all the rest of everybody out, because like there's such tight integration in between Apple devices, whether it's phones and tablets and laptops and everything. And it's like, and as Windows and Android, kind of get closer together and almost to the point where they're like merging, because you can, with some Android phones, you can mirror your phone on your computer screen and you can run Android apps and yada, yada, yada. So which... I'm assuming you're a proponent of like open platforms and making things all work together like in a geeky sort of way. So like which way do you kind of lean on that? I mean, I kind of see where Apple's coming from, because you want to get people into the ecosystem, you want to make money, but you also want to be able to control the experience. But on the other hand, now you've got Windows 11 running on a Raspberry Pi. Microsoft doesn't want Windows 11 running on a Raspberry Pi because it's probably going to be a terrible experience. So like, where do you fit in that ethos of
Well, look at it this way. I mean, we live in an interconnected world, is what you're saying. So
right.
Not now with smartphones and the internet, 4G, 5G, everything we do is interconnected. So I can use my phone, I can do banking on it, I can go to the supermarket, I can just touch my phone on the point of sale unit, and my bank account suddenly says, ching, ching, that money has been taken. So here we have a normal day experience going shopping for bread and milk and eggs. And what's happening is that the whole system is interconnected to the point that I can pay for my shopping and then go home using my smartphone. So it's a classic everyday example of an interconnected system. Now, everything we do in life is interconnected. We have to drive on a certain side of the road, different in Britain than it is in the rest of the world, but that's a different story. But we have to drive on a certain road. Okay, the pedals on the car have a certain order. You don't get into a car and suddenly find that that the accelerator is on the left. All these things, everything is interconnected and it has to follow a certain way of doing things. Otherwise, life would be so confusing. I mean, it's hard enough when you do go to a door, and how many comical videos are there? Because some people try to push a door that you're trying to pull, and they kind of flatten their nose on it, and we all laugh at it, you know. But that's a classic example of something that should be simple, and we get it wrong. So imagine now you go to a bigger thing, which is smartphones and tablets, and we've got on that. We consume our media. We've got our communications, messaging and Gmailing, emailing, that kind of thing. We've got music. We've got games. We've got all these things all connected. Now, what Apple are actually saying is, although they've got very good at the marketing, what they're actually saying is you can interconnect everything. I'm sure you can interconnect a Mac with an iPhone, with a home kit, whatever piece of magic smart home stuff you've got, and it all works perfectly as long as everything you buy is Apple. Simple as that. As long as everything you buy is Apple, it will all fit together. But on the other, outside that wall is, well, the rest of the world is trying to get things to connect together without it all being from one company. So Apple's power is that if you buy a home kit, if you buy a speaker, if you buy a laptop, if you buy it all comes from them. And of course, that's why it's the richest tech company in the world. I mean, doesn't take a genius to work out why that is, because you have to buy all their kit. And once they get you into their ecosystem, you bought a phone, then I bought an iPad, then I bought the speaker, then I bought the earbuds, then I bought the home kit thing, and now I'm going to buy a Mac. And it's like, I've just given all my money to Apple, and Apple are going, ching, 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 ching. Thanks very much. Thanks very much. You know, whereas like in Android, for example, there's a big thing, you know, for the last few years that manufacturers have been dropping the headphone sockets, for example. I hate that. I hate that completely. I just can't understand the mentality of taking the most simple worldwide standard for connecting audio, the headphone jack, and say, no, we're not going to support that anymore. As if like, why? You know, why? Okay, so now with Android, if I want to buy a phone, I choose one with a headphone jack in it. But I've got the choice. I can look around and see which companies are selling devices that meet my specifications. But if I was in Apple world, I take what Apple gives me or I don't. And then I've got no choice. Like it or lump it, my way or the highway. But with Android, I can say, well, actually, that company is providing headphone sockets. That company is providing NFC. That company is providing Bluetooth 5. That company is providing the triple camera. This company is, and I go and pick what I want. And I say, that's the phone I'm going to buy. Thank you very much. And then it runs Android, it runs Google services. I've got my Gmail, I've got my messaging, I've got everything in it. And it's like, thanks very much. That's the difference.
So speaking of which, what phone are you using these days? Does it have a headphone jack?
It's a secret. It is a Xiaomi Mi 9, and yes, it has a headphone jack. That's right.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool. So, a couple of our viewers are steering us back towards Windows 11, which is fine with me. So, I just wanted to highlight a couple of questions that we have going on here. First of all, looking 2 to 3 years down the line, could we potentially see Windows 11 on a future Surface Duo, especially with a mature open Windows Store? Now that I've read that, I'm going to turn that comment off so that we can actually see our faces. So. So what do you think? Are we going to see Windows 11 on a future Surface Duo? I would have to imagine so.
I mean, obviously, the whole foldable thing and exploring new formats for this intersection between tablets, laptops, and smartphones, we're going to see lots of experiments. Some of them are going to fail. Some of them are going to work. And when they find out the right combination of price and functionality, personally, I've got a bit of a problem with foldables at the moment in that I get my phone out and now I have an extra action to open it. Why would I want to do that? That's the thing that confuses me at the moment. Why I get, what time is it? You know, or I've just got a ping, just got a message. It's like,
well,
no.
Some would argue that having a foldable device makes you think more deliberatively about when you want to use your phone because of that extra step. So, and other foldables.
Human nature is you'll go and open it anyway. There's no
That's
way.
True.
No way the phone goes ping and you go.
Well, and then like the Fold 2, which I reviewed, camera reviews on the YouTube channel, so go check that out. But that had the exterior display that you wouldn't have to open your phone. Have you had a lot of experience with foldables? I'm not sure like how in the Android Authority. I don't know, like, if you're hanging around with the reviewers at Android Authority or if they're sending you toys to play with or anything like that.
So I haven't used a foldable daily myself. But
Okay.
I remember the era when all phones were foldable. You probably remember that era as well.
Sure.
Right? Okay. So feature phones back in the day were foldable. And the point is that I remember the irritation of having to flip a lid or flip something over so that I could get. Oh, you could try and find one now in your box of.
Oh no, I already have one.
Oh, there you go.
That's the ThinkPad Fold, which I did a review on the podcast. So check that out. Link in the show notes.
A ThinkPad is different because that's not the device you carry around in your pocket. You see.
No, it is not.
When you get that out, you're deliberately setting it up, and it's the same with a MacBook. You have to open a MacBook, okay, or any laptop to actually use it, and that's not a problem. The problem is when they try to do it in the phone form factor.
Okay.
I'm not going to take it out of my pocket and go, oh, open it up again. And so they know that, so they try to put the second display on it, which means I then got to look at this little display, e-ink display, or a smaller display, or whatever. And as you can see, it's not yet been a success. But if Microsoft makes some hardware that can handle that kind of factor well, then yeah, I'm sure we can see Windows 11 all kinds of things for sure.
Nice. All right. Well, and we got another question here. Would it be difficult for Microsoft to launch Windows 11 in a compatibility mode with inferior security, or is it simply a marketing image that they want to make? We are Microsoft. We are secure like Apple. So I think what they're if you don't mind, Vazikos. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that name. But anyway, if you don't mind, I think what they're asking is, could they release a potentially like kind of a starter version of Windows 11 that could run on hardware that doesn't necessarily have the TPM 2.0 or the secure boot? Would that ever happen?
Absolutely, they could. Of course, they could. There's no problem with that whatsoever.
They could. But would they? I think is the question.
Well, this is the question. Because if you think about it, Windows 10 is supported until 2025, okay? So here's their problem now from a branding point of view. They say, move to Windows 11 because it's super secure. And if you don't, you can stay with Windows 10 until 2025. So then you say, so Windows 10 isn't super secure then?
Well, it will be until 2025.
Well, no, but it won't, because they're saying that Windows 11's got extra stuff in it with the TPM and secure boot and all that you can't get in Windows 10. So what they're saying is that actually we're letting you hang out there in the dry until 2025, and then you have to move over to Windows 11 because it's super secure. So of course they can make a version of Windows 11 that hasn't got all that stuff in it because it's called Windows 10. Okay, and it already works like that, and it's supported until 2025, and they can just change the graphic interface and put the Windows and the taskbar wherever they want and say, hey, look, it's Windows 11. But of course, the problem they've got is the whole industry is trying to sort out the security problem. And of course, when you talk about Windows, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Well, viruses. That's the whole
malware.
Malware. And I mean, if you look at all the ransomware problems that have been going on in the world at the moment, I'm pretty much guaranteed they've all come via a Windows laptop or a Windows computer somewhere along the way. So that's what's happened. So Microsoft are, whether they're doing it from a branding point of view, whether they're doing it because they just want to actually do the right thing, so they're just actually really decent chaps that want to do the right thing, I don't know. But the reality is, of course, is that the latest hardware does have things built into it that can make that better. TPM, secure boot, and all this other stuff. So that's absolutely true. But then, of course, the reason why Microsoft is taking the heat, I've been thinking about this, is because they don't want to say, blame Intel. They don't want to say, blame AMD, because when you say you've got to have an 8th generation CPU, you say, okay, well, why didn't the 7th generation have it? And they go, oh, go and ask Intel. They don't want to do that because they'll get in real trouble with Intel for pushing the blame onto them. So there's this kind of politics as well going on here about, well, we'll take the heat because we don't want to, but actually it's Intel's fault, really, that we're in this mess, because all the stuff that they're trying to fix should have been fixed years ago. But don't go, I mean, if you ask an expert who knows about Intel's security record, especially with their management engine and all that kind of stuff, there are so many problems that Intel have had, but they do quite a good job of actually keeping a lid on it from a PR point of view. But
and some would argue that's just as important.
Well, exactly. What's your priority here? That's the question.
Right. So let's transition over to, I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I kind of ran out of questions at this point. So we've been kind of blasting through all this, and it's really been it's really been a ton of fun. So, I want to talk about Raspberry Pis because I know the Raspberry Pi is like one of those devices. It's always been, and this is kind of weird to say, but it's always been kind of like an aspirational device, because like if I ever wanted a Raspberry Pi, that would mean I actually had a use for it. And I don't have the kind of brain that can come up with a good use for a Raspberry Pi. And then it was about a year ago, I think, Raspberry Pi came out with the Raspberry Pi 400, was it? That was built into the keyboard. It was kind of like a mini PC built into the keyboard. Have you had a chance to play with the Raspberry Pi 400?
Yes, I do. I have a Raspberry Pi 400, and I have a review on the Gary Explains video channel, not here on this podcast, but over at my channel.
Right. Link in the show notes.
Link in the show notes. Thank you very much. So yes, I have a 400. It's just over there, but you can't see that. And so now the thing you've got to remember is that the people that developed Raspberry Pi grew up at the same time as I did. We're a similar age, and all the computers when we were children looked like the Raspberry Pi 400. So if you look into retro computing, the Commodore 64, the BBC Micro, the ZX Spectrum, the VIC-20, all these computers, they all were basically a keyboard with the computer built in underneath the keyboard. That's exactly
that you plugged into a TV. Wow, actually, now that you mentioned that, that's a very good point. I hadn't considered that. But
so basically, anyway. The guys said, "Oh, I know what we'll do. We'll recreate our childhood, and we'll create this Raspberry Pi 400 that looks exactly like the Commodore 64 did, but with modern plastic and modern keyboards." And that's what it is. So what they're trying to do is to see if they can re-fire up the home computer revolution of the 1980s and the early 1990s by providing this piece of kit that you don't need very much to get yourself up and running. Yeah. And it does seem to be working. I mean, Ebden Upton, that's the guy that runs it, said that there is a correlation between the number of people going into university to study computer science and computer science related subjects and the availability of educational projects that you can do as a child. And so after the home computer revolution, all the way through the 90s, and right up to the year 2000, there were lots of people going into computing at higher education because they had a background at home. And then suddenly we got the PlayStation and the Xbox, and everyone went, "Oh, I'm winning," And suddenly they had no idea.
Who hurt you, Gary?
I got a comment once, someone saying, "Don't mock people who play games." I was like, well, I've got more important things to do in my life, So, and what the point is, of course, they didn't have that tech background. So then the number of people going into university dropped off significantly. And now, because of the Raspberry Pi, because of microcontrollers, because of these kind of things, we're actually seeing an uptake again. And of course, that's what we want to see. That's the positive side of it.
Right. Well, and there's been a lot of emphasis in like STEM and STEAM and STREAM and all the different EAMS. But there's been a lot of emphasis that, like, even my daughter's grammar school had like a STEM club. So, I guess get them while they're young. But
absolutely. Yeah.
One of the things about the Raspberry Pi 400, I never had a chance to test it out, but it seemed like it was making like the Raspberry ecosystem a lot more accessible to people. So like, so I kind of actually, now I'm kind of thinking out loud. I'm wondering if the Raspberry Pi 400 was trying to make things more accessible to people like me who, don't necessarily know or want to go through the trouble of setting up like a Raspberry Pi with a monitor and a mouse and a keyboard, put it all into the same package for idiots like me, or if it's more of a nostalgia throwback to the Commodore 64. I'm kind of, you mentioned you've spoken with the CEO of Raspberry once or twice. Has there been any insight into that? Is it just strictly a nostalgia play, or is it an accessibility thing? Or?
No, I mean, you've got to be honest. When you see a Raspberry Pi, it's a circuit board. Okay, so
right.
When you see it, you go, "What's that?"
Right. That's exactly what I do. Actually, exactly like that.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're already into a bit of computing, a bit of electronics, you go, "Oh, look at that! I can connect that to the Doobry and I can do the thingy with it." But when you're someone who's not into it, you say, that's just a piece of electronics. What I mean, you might as well open up your hi-fi or your video, your DVD player and look at the circuit board. Just as much sense to me there than there is over there. So the one thing about the 400 is it does make it accessible. You say, oh, I know what that is. It's a computer. I understand a computer. And then because you can then still do the other stuff like make light bulbs flash on and off and things with the same piece of equipment, it becomes a bridge into then going further. They always say the first bite is the most important one. And if you can get people to come on board and remove any kind of hesitation, then who knows what robot or sensoring equipment, or monitoring equipment they could be building next, because they've already got hold of a bit of kit. So yeah, absolutely. I think, but the design is definitely nostalgic. There's no doubt about it. Now they decide to do that. They say, well, how do we do it? Well, we'll make it look like the Commodore 64. I mean, that's basically there was no other way around it, really. So that's what happened.
Yeah. I'm kind of wondering if we're going to see any more generations of the Raspberry Pi 400, and I haven't been paying attention recently. And like I said, the original Raspberry Pi 400 is about a year old or so at this point, right? So I'm kind of wondering if there's going to be like a Gen 2 at this point, or because like when I think Raspberry Pi, I always think like these cool little projects that you could build. Actually, I always go back to pardon me. I always go back to like gadget geocaches, and like we've had a number of them around Chicago where you have to go and like press a sequence of buttons, and that'll like unlock the box that allows you to retrieve the geocache, stuff like that. So like I kind of wonder if so when I think of a Raspberry Pi, I think of that little circuit board box that's like attached to some kind of controller input where I can punch in a code and like it'll do a thing. So when it comes to like something like the Raspberry Pi 400, that's a whole different animal as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure as far as you're concerned too, because you have some knowledge on the matter.
Yeah, so there's two. You've asked two questions there. So first of all, the 400 is just as capable as the other Raspberry Pis. You can still connect your little combination thingies to it and do your little thing. So that's the great thing about it. You can actually use it and then still do Raspberry Pi stuff with it, which is why it's so powerful. Of course, remember, Raspberry Pi is always software and hardware. So it also helps people learn how to write computer programs in Python or in JavaScript, whatever it is that they're choosing to learn. And then the hardware side, which is your little motors and your switches and your little combination boxes. So that's definitely the power of it, because you're getting yourself the step into the door without it looking like a terrible circuit. In fact, we went to an escape room actually last summer, and inside it was all just made up of Raspberry Pis and other similar microcontrollers. So every time you did the combination on the thing to open the door, you could see inside there's a little Raspberry Pi or a little microcontroller that was doing the thing. So you could actually build an entire escape room using these devices if you're good at woodworking as well and painting and building, all the stuff. Now, the other question you were saying is, what's the future going to be? Now, this is an interesting question, because I think that, I don't want to be unkind, I don't know whether the Raspberry Pi Foundation has lost its way. Now, what do I mean by that? You've got the Raspberry Pi, which you recognize, even people like yourself. I know what a Raspberry Pi is, and I've seen it. I haven't got one, but I know what it is. So you've got this thing, the Raspberry Pi, but then you now got the Raspberry Pi 400. So you say, now, is that the direction they're taking? Like you say, a Gen 2? Or are they going back to doing the other Raspberry Pi? Or are they trying to do both? Now, if it was that question, you could say, okay, we'll see. But they also then released the Raspberry Pi Pico a while back, which is a microcontroller. So you can't run Linux on it. There's no desktop, no HDMI monitor, no mouse, no keyboard. It's a microcontroller. And so very, very low power, very, very small amount of memory, but great, again, for your little combination boxes on your geocache things. So now they're into microcontrollers and the single board computers and the full computers, and now they've got three directions they're following. So I'm saying to myself, looking from the outside, well, which one are they going to try and follow the most? And what their goal used to be, get people into university by letting them fiddle with software and hardware at home, get them while they're young, then they take that up later on. But now they're into three different prongs of things. Are they going to abandon one? Are they going to try and do all three? I don't know. Now, the even more complicated thing is the Raspberry Pi Foundation is a charity.
Okay.
It's not a business. So they're doing it for the educational side of it. Now, there is a business side of it which handles all the actual production, because they have to do that with an actual business. So there's a Raspberry Pi Foundation, and there's a Raspberry Pi company, and they kind of all run by the same people. But if you're running something as a foundation, that gives you certain freedoms, because you know you can do things without profit, and you can try and get certain taxes off, and you can lower the prices. Great stuff, and that's what we've all benefited from. But it also means that you're limited, because your charity, your foundation, has a purpose. You suddenly can't be, let's feed starving children in whatever country is in need at the moment, because that's not the roots of the foundation. So how much it's limited by its original goal. Can it stick to its goal? These are questions that I don't know the answers to, and we'll have to wait and see what the foundation comes up with next to maybe try and answer that.
They're kind of like the OnePlus of circuit boards now, because they've got like the OnePlus 9 now, the OnePlus Nord, and the OnePlus. So I get it. So, well, it's an interesting question. So what the thing I think I want to go ahead and close on is Speedtest G. That is a Gary Explains original, and objectively speaking, I think it's one of the best ways to test a phone's performance, because maybe before we get too far into the weeds, why don't you go ahead and explain like what Speedtest G is and how it accomplishes its goal?
Okay, so normally when people are testing performance, they would turn to a benchmark, and a benchmark is basically create a program that does something, and then let's give it a score. So you've got Geekbench, you've got Antutu, you've got 3D Marker, with all these lots of popular benchmarks for Android phones, and there are similar ones that exist for PCs and so on.
Yeah.
And the problem is people don't trust them. They say, well, that's an artificial program some guy invented in a lab, and it doesn't reflect the real world. So then what happened is that some very popular YouTubers started this idea of a speed test, where they started to open up apps and then would see how long it would take to open the app. The idea being, this is real world, because in the real world, you don't run a benchmark every day. You run Gmail, or you run, Subway Surf, or whatever the latest game is that you run. And that's the real world. But the problem there is that all they're measuring is startup time, and startup time is not the same as running time. The performance you get while you're playing the game. A game could start up in blindingly fast because the guy that wrote it, or the person that wrote it, had some really clever ideas about how to start up. And then once you start playing it, you've got 10 frames a second because your phone can't handle it. Right. So Speedtest G is a combination of benchmark and speed test. And the way it works is there are these different tasks that I've written, which are benchmarks, really. How quickly can it sort some numbers? How quickly can it write to a database? How quickly can it compress an image? And then at the same time, they are started up on your phone, just like you would start a normal app. So Speedtest G is actually an Android launcher, just like you launch by pressing the icon. The launch itself goes through a program sequence and launches these different programs. And then at the end of it, you've got a time measure to say how long it took. Now, the really satisfying thing about it is that I've been doing this now for 2 or 3 years, is that we haven't had any unexpected results. And what I mean by that, there have been some very close calls where a phone has beaten another phone. But what I'm saying is we haven't had, oh, look, that's got a Snapdragon 750G, and yet it's beating the Snapdragon 888. Oh, no, there's something terrible.
That's not supposed to happen.
That's not supposed to happen, yeah. What's wrong with your test? Your test is rubbish. So when you rank up all the phones that we've tested, actually, it does follow that the Snapdragon 700 series is slower than the 600, faster than the 600 series and slower than the 800 series. And there is a nice line that you can draw across all these different devices, and it works really, really well. So that's what we're doing, and we're testing the phones, and we're trying to see which ones offer the best real-world performance with a combination of starting them up and running a benchmark, which is closer to what you would do in the real world.
That's awesome. And I know I filmed a few of those Speedtest G videos for you, so those were fun, and it was interesting because I remember one of the phones that I did the Speedtest G on was it was a LG, was it the V50 or V60? I don't remember, but I remember running a Speedtest G on the LG V50 while watching a Speedtest G video on the second screen of that particular phone. So that was a lot of fun. But I think what really makes Speedtest G the most fun is the call. that comes from Mr. Gary Sims as he's describing the you're just like a play-by-play man. I love it. And as a big sports fan myself, I really appreciate the ability to call something like that. And so I think if you haven't had the opportunity to watch a Speedtest G video, you should definitely take the opportunity to go check it out, because it's like what Gary says. It's a very objective and easily repeatable performance metric for all the phones that come across Android's authority's desk, which is basically every phone. So, out of curiosity, and I think I know the answer to this, but have you run into any issues trying to test Huawei phones with the lack of Google services? Now, I would think that since we've discovered that Harmony OS is basically Android 10, I would think that there probably hasn't been too much of an issue there. But maybe you can correct me on that.
The biggest issue, funny enough, at the moment is that these Chinese phones, and for example, I've got here on my desk a Red Magic 6. I can't remember which model it is, but they don't let you change the launcher because they're trying to copy Apple. So they have their own launcher with their own user interface that looks like iOS, and you can't change away from it. And a Speedtest G is a launcher.
Right, so you have
to be able to replace. Now, it is a standard freedom for all Android phones that you can run your own launcher. That's a fundamental thing. And it really annoys me when these companies launch phones and they block the ability to run the launcher. So the problems we've had with Huawei and with other Chinese brands like the Red Magic is you can't run it as a launcher, and therefore we can't do the test. So they're lost, really, because we just have to say, sorry, we can't change the launcher.
Right. And if I remember correctly, Speedtest G is a proprietary written software. So, and the reason, if I remember correctly, part of the reason you did that was specifically so that companies can't fudge their phones in order to get better results. As you hear about, a lot of companies that will, open the throttles up full throttle when it detects that they're running like a Geekbench or something like that. So,
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, one question I want to ask you. I just did a review of the Lenovo ThinkPad Nano that just went up on the podcast this past weekend. And actually, I can't say that because that's did I just do the Lenovo ThinkPad? Maybe I don't know. I think it was just this past weekend. I have no editorial calendar. I took a month off and it screwed everything up. Anyway, so I just did a test on the Lenovo ThinkPad, and I ran Geekbench as a benchmark. And one thing that I like about Geekbench is when you run the Geekbench on a phone, it'll give you a score, and then it'll say, this OnePlus 9 ran exactly like Samsung Galaxy S20 or something like that. So when I did the same thing with the ThinkPad, the results came back and said, hey, this 11th generation Intel Core i7 ran just like an 11th generation Intel Core i7. And I'm just like, thanks. So one thing, maybe I can add, maybe I don't even know if this is in your realm of knowledge, but I get a score for Geekbench from a Lenovo laptop, and I get a score from Geekbench from a OnePlus 9 Pro. Are those scores related in any way, or is it like an ARM score versus a x64 score, so they're like apples and oranges?
Well, when it comes to Geekbench, technically they are using the same tests on both Android and on iOS and on Intel. The problem
Windows,
and Windows, yeah. So the problem you've got, though, is that they do actually enable certain optimizations on the Intels. For example, you've got SSE4 and AX1 and all these other stuff that you can get in these things, and they do switch on those optimizations. So now you've got the benefit of those extra instructions and that extra hardware that might be able to run something faster. Now that's real world, that's good, because that's what the instructions are there for. They're meant to make the programs run faster. But because the other one doesn't have that program, that instruction set, then it's doing it the long way around by running all the instructions through the CPU or the floating point unit, and so it takes longer. So that can skew the results. So that's an important thing. But as a kind of a ballpark, it is really this processor 5 times faster than a laptop than it is in a smartphone. Yes, it is, because of course a laptop is huge. It's got a big battery. It's got fans. A desktop even more so. And yes, so you are getting greater performance. And so it is, as a rough, kind of like a measure. Absolutely, you can do that. Now, while I'm saying that, I do also have Speedtest G PC. Which
you do?
PC. I do. Yes, I do.
That's awesome.
And I recently did a test between the top of the line MacBook and a MacBook with an M1, and I ran Speedtest G PC to see the results of that, and it categorically proved that the M1 is a blazingly fast chip, even compared to an Intel i9, which was in the other MacBook. So check out that video also on the Gary Explains channel.
Let me just jot this down. Link to MacBook Speedtest G. I did not know that. I guess I need to get caught up on my Gary Explains videos. So that's pretty cool. So and so when you are doing a Speedtest G on a PC, is that going to be comparable to a Speedtest G on a phone, or is it? So different apples and oranges.
Different apples and oranges. I made a decision that it would be better to test something specifically for a phone, and so that's what I've done. So they're not compatible as scores, but that was just a decision I made. I could have made the other decision. It's all about how much effort I want to put into these things. That's the bottom line. How much effort maintaining it, running it, and all that kind of thing. Now, while we were talking about the M1 chip, my video today that I've just posted is actually about Qualcomm saying they can make a chip that will beat Apple's chips. So we've talked about the M1. Of course, the M1 is Apple's processor that Apple designed, but it uses the ARM instruction set. So it's the same instruction set that you find in the iPhones, and you also find in Android phones from Qualcomm and Samsung and so on. It's not an Intel processor. It's not an AMD processor. And of course, the M1 has been blazingly fast. As I said, looking at that speed test program I've got, it's really, really fast. And I've got a Mac M1, and so it's here in front of me. It's what I'm using now. And it's great. It's absolutely wonderful. But, of course, everyone else wants a slice of that pie. They've set the bar, and it's like, can you beat the Apple? So this year, Qualcomm bought a company called Nuvia. Now, Nuvia was actually started by some ex-Apple engineers who worked on the M1.
Oh, all right.
Okay, they started their own chip company trying to make chips for servers, for the data center, for the cloud, that kind of thing. So they were not going to try and tread on Apple's toes. They were going to just try and do something different. And then Qualcomm bought them for $1.4 billion.
Wow.
Okay. And then what happened is that now Qualcomm has said we are now going to launch a laptop processor next year that's going to rival Apple's processor, because the people who are designing it are the people that designed Apple's processor. So we're going to see whether Qualcomm can pull that off or not, or whether Apple are going to dig deep and come up with something even better. The M2, the M1X, whatever it ends up get called, and then see whether this is just a kind of a non-starter, or whether actually there's a real battle going to go on now between basically Windows 11 on a Snapdragon processor versus Mac OS on an Apple processor. That's the battle that's lining up to see what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens with the Qualcomm N1 chip that comes out next year. Because
I think they should call it the Q1. I think that'd be really funny if they call it the Q1,
there you go.
Q2X or whatever. They want to just mimic Apple's naming all the way through. That would really annoy them, I think.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, so we have crossed the hour mark here. So now it's time to go ahead and roll out the red carpet for you, Mr. Gary Explains. Go ahead and let everybody know where they can find you, as if they didn't already know, because you're kind of a big deal. But let everybody know where we can find you on the socials and on the internets.
So obviously on YouTube, just type in Gary Explains YouTube and you'll find the channel pretty quickly. Gary Explains on Twitter. GaryExplains.com if you want to sign up to the newsletter or find links to other social media like Instagram. And of course, I'm still writing for Android Authority as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I want to thank the viewers that we had come on. And by the way, I should explain to my patrons, I kind of screwed up and made this video public, and I didn't mean to do that, but we did get some good conversation from the subscribers. So I appreciate y'all coming on and chatting with us and asking some great questions about Windows 11. Thank you, Gary, for confirming that my MSI laptop can, in fact, upgrade to Windows 11. And I want to thank you for taking the time to come on and for being the awesome dude that you are.
Absolute pleasure, Adam. And let's not wait another year before we do this. We should do this, again soon. It's absolutely great fun. Thank you very much for having me on.
Definitely. And we will have you on again before the year is out. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and sign off and say thank you to Gary. Thank you for everybody watching. Thank you for everybody listening. And thank you for giving us the benefit of the Doud.